My name is Renee Castellano, and I'm 34. A year ago, I was ladling soup at a family shelter in Ridgefield, Ohio, my 8-year-old daughter stacking trays beside me, when an elegant older woman in a visiting donor group stopped dead in the dining hall and stared at us like we were ghosts. She was my grandmother. My mother had spent 8 years telling me that woman wanted nothing to do with us. And the first thing she said, in front of her whole tour group, was, "Why aren't you living in the house on Birchwood Lane?" I looked at her the way you look at someone speaking a language you almost remember. What house? 4 days later, I walked into my parents' 35th anniversary party with my grandmother on my arm and watched my mother and father turn the color of old paper in front of 70 guests. What I'd learned in those 4 days was uglier than anything I'd imagined on my worst night in that shelter. And what I did with it, nobody in my family saw coming. Welcome back to Second Act Stories, where the quiet ones stop staying quiet. Pour your coffee, tell me where you're listening from, and hit subscribe because you don't want to miss this one. Let me back up because I know what you're thinking. How does a working nurse end up sleeping in a shelter with her kid? Fair question. I'm a home health nurse. I take blood pressure in farmhouse kitchens and sit with people nobody else has time for. It's honest work. It has never once been lucrative work. Last fall, my daughter Maya had an asthma attack bad enough for 3 nights in the hospital. Insurance covered most of it. The deductible ate $3,800 and the missed shifts ate the rest. My savings went from a cushion to a punchline. Then, in January, a notice appeared on my apartment door. New owners. 60 days to vacate. I wanted on record that I did everything right. I picked up every double shift my agency offered. I applied to 14 apartments. Every landlord in 3 towns wanted first, last, and deposit nearly $6,000 just to touch the keys, for rents that had climbed since I'd last checked. The housing assistance waitlist was 9 months long. I sat at my kitchen table running the numbers until they stopped pretending there was a way through. A bed for Maya, a roof that locked food, gas to reach my patients. I could afford 3 of the 4. I looked into a car, briefly, the way you look at a life raft you're ashamed to need. A coworker mentioned a woman on our floor who'd lived out of her sedan for a summer with 2 kids, showering at the gym before shifts, and I lay awake doing the math on that too. How you'd manage Maya's inhaler in a glove box, how you'd explain a parking lot to a third grader who still believed in permanent things. I crossed it off the list, not because it was impossible, but because I still had exactly one relative with a spare bedroom and a driveway, and pride is a luxury you're supposed to spend before you spend your child's stability. Mine ran out on a Wednesday, and by then I had exactly one option left, and I hated it more than anything I've ever done. I drove to my parents' house and asked if Maya and I could stay in their guest room for 1 month while I saved a deposit. I had never asked them for anything since the day I told them I was pregnant. My mother let the silence sit, then smiled. "Oh, honey, the guest room is my sewing room now. Besides, you've always been our resilient one. You'll land on your feet." My father studied the carpet like it owed him money. I filed that look away the way you file a symptom that doesn't match the rest of the chart. On my way out, I tried one more door. What about Grandma Vivian? Savannah has room. My mother's face shut like a storm window. Your grandmother made her feelings about you very clear a long time ago. Don't embarrass yourself. She said it gently. That was always the worst part. She could hand you a locked door and make it sound like a kindness. 6 weeks later, my mother's own mother walked into the one place my parents swore they'd never let us end up, and she was the only one who looked ashamed. Willowbrook Family Center gave us a room with 2 beds, a lock, and a laminated list of rules. I could have kissed that lock. If you've never stayed in a family shelter, forget whatever picture just came to mind. It was clean, loud, and full of women exactly like me, coming back after full shifts to sleep beside their kids. I kept my scrubs pressed and my mouth shut. Not one coworker knew. I told myself that was professionalism. It wasn't. It was the oldest rule I'd written for myself at 25. Asking is owing. If nobody helps you, nobody gets to hold it over you. So I ran shelter life like a hospital unit, homework by 6, showers by 8, inhaler, water cup, lights out. I charted my own daughter like a patient because charts had never let me down. I labeled our 2 shelves the way I label a med cart. Mine, shared. I learned the sound of every door in that hallway, which kids cried at what hour, which mothers needed the good chair by the window, and which ones needed to be left entirely alone. I learned to shower fast and dress in the dark, so the other women wouldn't see my agency badge and start asking questions I didn't have good answers for. Talia, our caseworker, caught me color-coding our storage bins one night and said, "You know you're allowed to just be tired, right?" I laughed it off and reorganized the bins anyway. The truth is, I had a handle on everything except the one question no chart could answer. How does a woman who did everything right end up with her daughter's whole world folded into two plastic bins under a donated bed frame? I ran the numbers in my head at night the way other people count sheep. 9 years at the agency. Not a single missed shift before Maya's hospitalization. A credit score I'd protected like a second child. None of it had bought us so much as a locked door of our own, and somewhere underneath the exhaustion, a small, patient voice kept asking why that math never seemed to add up for people like me. Then a flyer went up by the cafeteria. A donor group touring Thursday, board members and sponsors, families asked to tidy their rooms. I thought those people would walk past us like an exhibit. I had no idea one of them would know my face. Here's what I thought I knew about my grandmother. Vivian Ashworth, 83, Savannah, old money on my grandfather's side, older opinions on hers, the kind of woman who mailed monogrammed thank you notes and expected them mailed back. We saw her twice a year growing up, and my mother hummed with nerves for a week beforehand. Then I got pregnant at 23, unmarried, and that settled it. "She's from a different world," my mother told me. "She's asked me not to bring you to Savannah anymore." Vivian came to the hospital once, the day Maya was born, studied her face at the window for a long minute, and left. The silence started there. When Maya turned 1, I wrote my grandmother a letter, no requests, just photos and an open door. I had no address, so I gave it to my mother to deliver at my grandfather's birthday. A month later, she read it. She says, "You made your choices and need to manage on your own." That line rearranged me. I stopped writing, stopped asking, and built the next 8 years around manage on your own. Nearly all of that story was a lie, and the one true part wasn't the part I thought. Thursday came, and the donor group drifted through Willowbrook. I kept my head down over dinner trays. Maya's laugh carried the way it always does, and I think that's what turned my grandmother around, the sound, not the sight of me. She was small, straight-backed, pearl earrings, a cane she clearly resented, and she stopped so abruptly the director nearly walked into her. She looked at Maya, then at me, and her hand went to her chest. "Renee," she said my name like she'd seen me at breakfast. I stood there holding a tray of rolls, wanting the floor to open. She looked around the dining hall, the chore chart, my daughter's school clothes, my name badge, and asked her question, slow and precise. "Why aren't you living in the house on Birchwood Lane?" "What house?" Her face moved from confusion to arithmetic to something colder. She turned to the director. "Continue without me, please." Then to me, "Sit down, child. It appears we've both been robbed." Talia found us an empty room, and we compared 8 years like two auditors reconciling the same books and finding different numbers on every page. Her version: she'd bought a house near Ridgefield the month Maya was born, so I'd never owe rent to anyone, with my mother managing it locally. Every year since, she'd received photos and reports of a shy, grateful granddaughter who'd changed her number and wasn't much for calls. "Your thank you cards were lovely," Vivian said, her voice catching. "Carol always passed them along." My version took less time: the pregnancy, the closed door, the letter I wrote at Maya's first birthday, the reply that came back, "Manage on your own." Vivian's hands went still. "I never received a letter, and I have never once said those words about you." Every road between us for 8 years had passed through exactly one pair of hands, my mother's. Not a mix-up. A courier who ran both directions and delivered nothing but what she built herself. My grandmother stood, the cane no longer for leaning. "Get your coat. I'm 83. I no longer have time to be lied to sitting down." Her driver took us to Fairlawn and stopped in front of 214 Birchwood Lane, a gray Craftsman, deep porch maple tree, a wind chime, warm kitchen light. A stroller on the steps, a bicycle in the grass. A home, in every sense, I'd been sleeping 10 miles away from in a shelter. "I bought it the month she was born," Vivian said. $190,000, paid out. "It went into a trust with your name on it, Renee. Your mother asked to serve as trustee so someone local could manage things." Her jaw set. "It has been yours for 8 years. Every month you had a house." I got out and inventoried porch swing, new gutters, a welcome mat, while my daughter had slept an arm's length from me on a shelter cot 9 miles away. The front door opened. A young woman with a baby on her hip called out, "Can I help you? Are you from the management company?" I want to pause here because some of you already know where this goes. If you've ever stood outside something legally yours, you know that hum in your chest like a wire pulled tight. Tell me in the comments where you'd have gone first, your mother's kitchen or a lawyer's office, and hit subscribe because this family was just getting started with me. Management company, hold on to those words. That night I called my mother, wanting an explanation more than data. She picked up on the second ring. "Mom, I saw Grandma Vivian. She asked why I'm not living in my house on Birchwood Lane." No pause, no what house, no questions, just syrup poured over something cold. "Oh, sweetheart, I was afraid she'd do this someday. She's 83, things get tangled, and she leaves other people holding the broom. This isn't a phone conversation. Come Sunday to the party. We'll sort it out like a family. Bring Maya." I hung up and stood there a long time, cold in a warm building, understanding what I'd heard underneath the smoothness. No surprise. She'd been waiting 8 years for that call, lines already memorized. People only rehearse for trials they know are coming, so I decided to prepare too. Nurses are very good at records, and records are terrible liars. The next morning I sat in the Willowbrook computer room and pulled up the county recorder's site, public free. 214 Birchwood Lane, Fairlawn. A deed transfer to the Birchwood Trust, filed 8 years ago, trustee line typed neat as a badge. Carol Castellano. My mother, not a rumor anymore, a document. I kept digging. The house had been listed for rent within 4 months, $1,200 a month, climbing, applications routed through Fairlawn Home Management. The state business registry showed the filing, and the registered agent, Douglas Castellano. My father, the man who'd studied the carpet while his wife invented a sewing room. $1,200 a month for nearly 8 years, north of $110,000 in rent, on a house held for me by the two people who let me carry my daughter into a shelter. And where had it gone? One more name sat on the LLC as a member. Dean Castellano. My brother, whose food truck parks outside the hardware store on Fridays. I found him there. "Fairlawn Home Management, you're listed as a member. Tell me you didn't know about Birchwood Lane." Dean stared at the friar. "It wasn't a secret, family business. Mom ran it, Dad did the books, my name's on some paperwork." How long had he known there was a house? "Since the beginning. You weren't supposed to get hurt by it. You'd have been told when you were ready." Their favorite phrase. I stood in a parking lot learning my whole family had a script, and everyone had a copy but me. Guilt makes people generous with other people's secrets, and Dean kept going. The truck had been financed by a family investment 6 years back. He didn't say from which account. He didn't have to. My deductible had been $3,800, eaten alone, while my brother's brisket dreams were seeded with rent off my own house. I turned to leave. Dean called after me. "Before you go to war with her, you don't know what Grandma's money did to Mom." So I asked the one person who'd know, and to her credit, my grandmother didn't flinch. Over dinner that Friday, I asked straight out, "What did your money do to my mother?" Vivian set down her fork and for the first time looked her age. "It taught her to fill out forms." She told me about Carol at 22, a typed tuition request corrected in red pen before the check was signed, about the wedding, graded like a term paper. I thought I was teaching her that money is serious. What I taught her is that love comes with a ledger, and whoever keeps it is safe. She produced a small cream card from her handbag, monogrammed. "Thank you for the house. You've given us a fresh start. Love, Renee," dated 8 years ago. Not my handwriting, my mother's. The same careful script from every childhood birthday card, performing me, cashing my gratitude for herself. My real letter had never left her drawer. I sat there holding that forged little card under the dining room's soft lighting, and I felt something shift that had nothing to do with anger. My whole life, I'd assumed my grandmother's silence was a verdict on me, on the mess I'd made getting pregnant young, on the choices my mother said had disappointed her. It had never once occurred to me that the silence was a performance my mother had directed from both sides at once, feeding each of us just enough of the other to keep the wound open. Vivian turned the card over in her fingers like she was reading it for the first time, and for a moment the two of us just sat there, a grandmother and a granddaughter, mourning 8 years that had never needed to happen. Vivian wanted to fix it fast and expensively. Over dessert, she started a list with a fountain pen that cost more than my car payment. Item 1, speed. My attorney can correct the trust within the week. Tenants out in 30 days. You could be home by the 4th of July. I drove to Birchwood Lane the next morning and watched the house wake up, the young mother with her coffee, her husband wrestling a car seat, paper snowflakes still taped in the window, the exact crooked kind Maya makes. I thought about 60 days, about what a notice taped to a door does to a person's chest. Whatever my family had done to me, that woman hadn't done any of it, and I wasn't going to hand her baby a countdown to make myself whole faster. When I told Vivian no, full lease, honest notice, she looked at me a long moment, not with disapproval but surprise, like she'd ordered one granddaughter and been delivered a sturdier model. You'd wait, on principle, while living in a shelter. Principles are the only furniture I own, I said. First time I ever heard my grandmother laugh. She picked me up Saturday to see the house in daylight, and before I got out of the car, she worked a key off her own ring, brass, worn smooth, a leather tag stamped 214. The locksmith cut 3 the week I closed. I mailed 2 to your mother for you. This one I kept, told myself it was for emergencies. The truth is, I wanted to hand it to you myself someday, and I let your mother convince me the time was never right. She folded my fingers around it. It was never mine to hold, Renee. Turns out it wasn't hers either. As evidence it was worthless, my mother had changed the locks years ago, but through everything that followed, my hand kept finding it. My phone buzzed, a panicked text from Dean. He'd told our mother I found the records. She knew that I knew. Willowbrook's Wednesday legal clinic couldn't come fast enough, so Talia made a call, and attorney Renata Cole gave me 20 minutes that Saturday night. I laid it out, the deed, the LLC, the listings, the forged card. She didn't interrupt once, then gave it back in 3 sentences. A trustee who conceals a trust from its beneficiary has breached her duty. You can demand a full accounting, petition for removal, and pursue repayment. This is not a gray area. The catch, she said, was that none of it would be quiet. A petition is public record, depositions are sworn, the trustee named would be my mother, in a town where she teaches Sunday school. Courts can move money. They cannot move what this will cost you at Thanksgiving. That evening my mother called and the syrup was gone. Dean tells me you've been pulling records, like we're criminals. I said nothing. Everything we did to preserve that house. Do you know what happens to an asset handed to a single mother with no savings? We kept it safe. A pause, then a pivot. Sweetheart, look at where you're living. Does that look like a woman ready for a property? We were right to wait. My 6 weeks at Willowbrook, purchased by her own locked guest room, handed back as evidence. Deny the help, then cite the drowning. We'll talk Sunday, Mom. Yes, this stays in the family. Your grandmother has done enough damage. She hung up first. I understood we weren't going to a party. We were going to a hearing, and my mother believed she was the judge. That night, Maya's voice came out of the dark. Priya heard Miss Talia say we have a house. I chose my words like medication, double-checked. Great-grandma Vivian bought a house a long time ago. Grown-ups made big mistakes about it and I'm fixing them. I don't know how it ends yet. A long pause. Does it have stairs? It has a porch and a maple tree. Drowsy, matter of fact. We never had a tree. One sleepy sentence went through me cleaner than anything my mother had said all week. My phone lit at midnight, my father, who hadn't called first in years. One line, whatever happens tomorrow, I'm sorry. Sunday, 2 o'clock. My grandmother's sedan smelled like leather and resolve. Tell me what you want me to do in there, she said, the first time in her life she'd ever asked anyone for instructions. Nothing, stand there, be seen. The truth doesn't need backup singers. We turned the corner onto a street dressed for celebration, banner, balloons, cars nose to tail, 70 guests murmuring behind the fence. We came up the driveway as my mother lifted a tray of deviled eggs mid-laugh. The laugh cut off like a wire. She saw her mother first, then me, and the tray hit the table hard enough to turn heads. My father set down his tongs. Quick pause. Picture it. 35 years, 70 guests, the daughter they'd quietly erased walking in beside the woman who'd paid for everything. If your family has ever rewritten history and called it protection, type Birchwood in the comments, and subscribe, because the next few minutes are why you're here. My mother recovered in under 5 seconds, crossed the yard smiling, hugged her mother for the audience, air-kissed near my cheek, and steered us inside like a tour guide redirecting around a fire. The kitchen door swung shut, and the smile came off like a badge at shift's end. How dare you, at our anniversary in front of this town? I set the folder on the counter, the deed, the LLC filing, the listings, the forged card on top. She didn't deny a single page. She straightened into her church posture. We weren't stealing it. We were holding it until you earned it. The door opened a crack, and 70 guests' worth of murmur drifted in as my grandmother's voice drifted out, clear as a bell across water. Say it again, Carol. Say the part about holding it. My mother's eyes cut to the doorway where an aunt stood frozen with a paper plate. My mother pivoted from defendant to hostess without a click. Mom's a little confused. It's her age. Renee's been staying at a shelter. Someone had to look after this family's affairs. Heads tilted toward me with cheap, costless pity. I said my piece once, level and unhurried. The house is on Birchwood Lane. Grandma bought it for me 8 years ago. Mom rented it out and kept the money. I found out on Thursday while living in a shelter. I'm not asking anyone to believe me. It's all public record. I walked out through the guests. A few faces did quiet math on my mother and started the count over. Fallout arrived predictably. The family group chat caught fire. My father called Monday from the garage, whispering, "A court would kill her. Whatever you need, he stopped. He'd been the LLC's registered agent for 8 years. My grandmother escalated procedurally, summoning me to her hotel Tuesday with a Savannah attorney and a new will. Everything to me, my mother and brother struck out. A trust for Maya that Vivian would control until 25. You'll never need any of these people again. I looked at the document and noticed what she'd actually built. A leash stitched into an inheritance, a chair at the head of a table, where you keep what you're given as long as you stay grateful. 2 clocks started ticking at once. The first was Talia's, a gentle reminder, delivered in the hallway with a clipboard against her chest, that shelter rooms carry time limits, and hours could stretch one more review cycle and then couldn't. Somewhere out there was a date circled in a filing cabinet with our names on it, and neither of us had been told what it was. The second clock arrived by certified mail on heavy cream letterhead from a law office 2 towns over, the kind of paper that tries to reassure you before you've even opened the envelope. My mother, it turned out, had lawyered up faster than I had. The letter used the phrase, amicable family resolution, 4 separate times, as if repeating it enough would make it true. The offer underneath the manners was simple. My parents would transfer the house to me immediately, deed in my name, the current lease honored, transfer costs covered, even a courtesy line about covering the notary fee, as if that gesture might balance 8 years of rent checks. In exchange, I would sign a release of all claims regarding the trust administration. No accounting, no repayment, and a confidentiality clause covering all family financial matters, present and past. Take the house, drop the shovel, keep the books dark. I sat with that letter a long time. It didn't feel like an insult, it felt like rescue. I called Renata and read it to her. That's a real house, she said. It's also a receipt for 8 years, marked paid in full, and you'd be the one signing it. Before you sign anything, you should know where the money went. I found out from Dean in the parking lot. The rent had gone 3 directions: my parents' home equity line, drowning after my father's layoff, the food truck, and a separate account, labeled in my mother's own hand, Maya's college fund. Untouched, growing. She hadn't lied when she said holding. In her ledger, she was the responsible steward managing what the rest of us would only waste. Kept. My father called that night. I asked him one question. Why? Your mother's been waiting her whole life to be trusted with something. Her mother never let her hold anything that mattered. Then there was a house. I didn't yell. I understood her completely, and I was done excusing her, and both of those things fit in one hand. The petition sat printed and unsigned for 2 days. Monday, I dropped Maya at school and sat in the courthouse parking lot with my hand around the brass key. It was not paperwork. My mother's. E was in the caption, removal of trustee, compelled accounting, 8 years, every dollar sworn. Once it crossed the counter, it became public record in a county where she'd taught Sunday school for 2 decades. Every peacekeeping instinct screamed to take the deal. I thought about Maya asking if the house had stairs, about the woman on the porch who deserved real notice, about manage on your own turning out to be my mother's forgery, and the settlement letter being the same forgery with better margins. I got out of the car and walked in. The clerk stamped the petition without reading past the first line, because to her it was Tuesday. That's what the end of being the manageable daughter sounds like. By the time I reached my car, my mother's attorney was already calling about mediation Thursday. And almost in passing, my grandmother would attend too, with a newly drafted will. The mediation room had a long table, water glasses, and a tissue box positioned like a threat. My mother's side offered the upgraded deal, house within the week, plus roughly $18,000 for a signed release in silence. We're prepared to be generous, even after the scene you caused, my mother said, voice soft. Maya should have her family, that's what I've always protected. Nobody laughed at the word. The house on that page pulled at me, it had a maple tree, and my daughter had never had one. Then my grandmother tapped her folder on the table like a gavel. My turn. Her attorney passed out copies. A new will, everything to me, my mother and brother struck, a trust for Maya controlled by Vivian until 25, and an unspoken expectation that we move to Savannah. You will never need any of these people again, she said kindly, and that was the frightening part. She meant it as love, with a leash sewn into every dollar. My mother came apart, not at me, at her own mother. After everything I've managed for this family, you'd hand it all to her. She couldn't even keep an apartment. My grandmother, calm as frost. You were told to give her a key, Carol, you kept it. Everything since is bookkeeping. I looked at my mother's face, still flushed from the fight with her own mother, and then at my grandmother's, composed again behind her glasses, and I thought about all the tables I'd sat at in my life where somebody else held the pen. My mother's kitchen table, where I'd learned that love came with conditions attached in invisible ink. My kitchen table at 2 in the morning, doing math that never worked out. This one, mahogany and cold under my palms, was just the newest version of the same table, dressed up in better lighting. 2 envelopes, 2 women. One offering my house back as payment for silence, one offering a fortune as salary for allegiance, the same ledger, kept in 2 hands. I set the brass key on the table, tag facing the room, and spoke level and unhurried. The petition stays. I want the accounting. All 8 years, sworn. The truth isn't a bargaining chip, it comes off the table first. Second, I'll take the house, just the house. It was given with no conditions, and it's the only thing in this family that ever was. Repayment can come slowly into an independent trust for Maya. Third, I turned to my mother, gently because it was still her face. I'm not asking the court for anything criminal. Handcuffs are just your ledger under worse lighting. I'm not keeping the family books anymore. It ends with me. Then I slid my grandmother's will back. No, Grandma, I won't take Mom's chair at your table. Love that keeps a ledger isn't love. It's rent, and I'm done paying it and done collecting it. The room went still. My mother stood, smoothed her skirt, and looked at me like a stranger in her kitchen. You never did learn what things cost. She walked out and did not look back. My father stayed in his chair, looked at the space where his wife had been, and signed everything: trustee removal, accounting, repayment. I should have signed something 8 years ago. First thing he'd done in his marriage without permission. Dean sent a signed repayment commitment that afternoon, his first honest paperwork ever. My grandmother sat looking at her rejected will, took off her glasses, and said slowly, "No one has ever told me no without asking for something else." Then come to dinner Sundays, I said. Bring nothing. She nodded once, the way she closes a deal. That week, an anonymous check funded Willowbrook's long-requested medical room. No name attached, no conditions. I choose to believe the lesson landed. 60 days had to pass first. I drove to Birchwood Lane and told the young tenant the truth on her own porch. Full lease honored, 60 extra days if needed, deposit returned. She cried a little, then laughed. I always wondered why the management company acted strange about this place. She found a rental 2 streets over, and her daughter would end up at Maya's school that fall. Moving date. I took one afternoon and a borrowed pickup. At the top of the steps, a stranger from the title company handed me 2 freshly cut keys and drove off, the entire ceremony marking the end of 8 years. I threaded the old brass key onto my ring, beside the car key and the med cabinet key. It opens nothing and started everything. It hangs there still. 1 year later, Maya chose the bedroom facing the maple tree, and on our first morning demanded to be measured against the doorframe with a pencil. That line is still there. The accounting closed exactly as Renata predicted: no fireworks, just numbers finally standing in daylight. Repayment arrives on schedule into an independent trust, with no opinions about anyone's worthiness, which might be the most luxurious thing money has ever bought this family. The secret college fund got folded in 2, every cent, no ceremony required. My grandmother flies up one Sunday a month, sleeves rolled, pearls swinging over dish suds, telling Maya scandalous stories about my grandfather and a stolen rowboat. Nobody manages anybody. My father calls Tuesdays from the garage. His Christmas card was signed simply Dad, alone on all that white space. My mother hasn't spoken to me since the mediation room. I hear she tells it differently around town. That's fine, I've stopped renting space in her version. On the second Tuesday of every month, I volunteer at Willowbrook's medical room, funded by my grandmother's quiet money and Talia's loud opinions. I sit with women who look the way I looked a year ago, holding trays and pressed scrubs and secrets, and I don't tell them what to do. I just tell them the truth doesn't need to be loud to be true, and that a locked door with your name on it is worth more than a family's good opinion of you. Some of them cry. A few of them ask for Renata's number, and I give it to them without hesitation, because nobody should have to find a good lawyer through a food truck parking lot at midnight the way I did. When someone asks where I live now, I finally have an answer, a street name a woman once asked me about in a shelter cafeteria. I say it plainly, the way you'd say any other address, and I no longer brace myself for the follow-up question. The rules of my house are short. The door opens for anyone who arrives with empty hands and an honest face. It stays shut to envelopes with conditions, gifts with leashes, love stapled to paperwork. Maya knows her great-grandmother through garden Saturdays, not a trust document with an age limit. And if my mother ever stands on my porch without her ledger, without needing to be the hero of her own version, she'll find the door was never actually locked. But the keys stay on my ring now, both of them. Nobody holds my keys for me again, not out of spite, and not out of love either. Here's what 8 years in other people's houses taught me. A family that makes you earn its love will always find you overdrawn. It will show you the balance sheet whenever it's convenient and hide it whenever it isn't, and it will call the hiding protection every single time. But the moment you stop paying rent on your own worth, the moment you stop applying for love like it's a loan you might not qualify for, it's astonishing what you can suddenly afford. A porch. A maple tree. A daughter who gets measured against a doorframe and believes, without needing to be told twice, that the pencil line will still be there next year. That's my story. One question in a shelter cafeteria. One brass key. A mother who called 8 years of theft holding. If this reminded you that a gift with strings was never really a gift, take it as your sign to check the paperwork and your boundaries while you're at it. Share this with someone who needs it. Drop your story in the comments, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.